Hi everyone! So today I am doing an October / fall / end of the year loose TBR. I guess I don't really have that much of an intro here. I'm just gonna get right to it and start off with audiobooks since I don't have those books physically. I don't want to forget about them. So first I will mention a book that I've already listened to the audiobook, and actually it was on YouTube, so I can leave it in the description. Though, put a pin in that because it's Hell House by, I think, Robert Mason. I honestly forgot the author's name, so I will have to clarify that. Hell House. This is so vulgar. Oh my god. So there's not that many, like, swear words necessarily, but it has a lot of, like, overtly sexual language, and it's a lot. But that also very much has to do with the plot, because it's a haunted house story, and the main entity of Hell House, the Belasco house, is Belasco, who was a man who was very deprived and just took human desires to the extreme with this sort of group of people that ended up living in Hell House, and they very much like secluded themselves and took things to the extreme with their sexual desires, with their culinary desires. It's a whole thing. It's a whole thing, but it was great. The book was very good. It's just a lot. Like, I can definitely see why people may not like it. And I had already seen the adaptation of it, which is The Legend of Hell House from 1973. And I recently bought that to rewatch it. And then I found the audiobook. So I was like, I'm gonna read that, then rewatch the movie. And I do remember the movie being, you know, somewhat like having some sexual tones and stuff like that, but not to the extreme of like everything that's in the book, which now I keep on meaning to look up when the original publication date was for that, because I was like, when was this published? If the movie is from 1973, it seems very out of character in a way for it to be. It's got to be like the late 60s. I can't imagine it being published like earlier than that, just because of like, you know, obviously ideal Americana of the 1950s, and that goes into the 60s until like the sexual revolution and stuff. Anyway, continuing with haunted house stories, I also have the Amityville Horror by J. Anson. I can't read my writing, which I've also seen movie adaptations of. I think, is it originally a trilogy? I don't know. I've seen like the first few movies of the original series and the remake from like the early 2000s. I know it's a franchise that has a lot of installments in it and probably needs to die, like stop making Amityville movies, but I'm very excited to read the book, especially because it's short. So something that I noticed about Hell House was that there was not that much of a build up to it. It was pretty much, they're at the house now, and it's like a 9-hour audiobook around that time. And I was just thinking of how I don't know, like last year I read The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson, and that became one of my favorite books. I actually prefer it to We Have Always Lived in the Castle, which I feel like a lot of people prefer over Hill House, at least from people that I watch on BookTube. And it takes a good like number of pages, and I mean, let me just take it off my shelf since I'm talking about it. The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson is 246 pages. And I feel like there's a good 40 pages or so before she even gets to the house, or before they're really doing anything pertaining to Hill House. There's a lot of sort of build up and setup of Eleanor as a character that will play a part in how the haunting goes down. If you've read it, you'll like know what I mean. I'll be interested to know like how much of sort of background information on the family that we'll get, or background information on the house that we'll get with the Amityville Horror, because I feel like that's something that, those are always important elements, but they're so different when it comes to whatever that specific story is, in terms of house haunting stories. Anyway, that was probably like unnecessary, but anyway, excited to read it, especially because I don't know that much about like the real family and like the real story. I think the author like took liberties with this. I also want to do research on that after I read it, so that also plays into why I'm excited to like finally get all this information. And then I also have The Séance by John Harwood, which I don't really remember the premise of other than there's a séance, so I can't say much on that one. And then I'm on book 6, Pandora, in the Vampire Chronicles by Anne Rice. I would like to read that, and then also if I can by, these are things that I would like to specifically get to in October if I can. Pandora, I don't necessarily have to finish in October, but I would like to read Pandora and the Vampire Armand, which is the 7th book in the Vampire Chronicles. I would like to read those 2 books by the end of this year, because then I'll have read 4 books in the Vampire Chronicles in 2021, which is double what I read last year. Yeah, okay, that's the audiobooks, and then I have books kind of everywhere. I literally reorganize, I put things away, and now I've just made a mess of my shelves again, but I'll just put this in like one stack after I'm done filming. So I think I'm just gonna like introduce each book with the context of when I want to read it. You'll get what I mean if that sounds weird. So something that I'm currently reading and would like to finish reading in October. It sounds kind of weird to say because they are stories by Edgar Allan Poe. I have 3 stories that I want to read. I've already read 1, and I only have 1 physically, so the other ones I'm actually going to read online. I read William Wilson already, which I did really like, and that was in preparation for, I wanted to read that before I watched Spirits of the Dead, which I have already watched now, and it was not that good. I personally didn't like it. I have a review of it. It's very short on Letterboxd. I'll leave that in the description if you want to hear my thoughts on it. And then in this book specifically is the facts in the case of Monsieur Valdemar. And I have read it before, but I don't really remember it, so I'm going to reread it. And this is just some like random 10 Great Mysteries by Edgar Allan Poe that like my brother had, and I stole it from him. So that's the only story in this book that I'm going to read, and then online I'm going to reread both The Fall of the House of Usher and Ligeia, because I would like to rewatch House of Usher and Tomb of Ligeia. So, and then I have just barely started, Perfume, the Story of a Murderer by Patrick Süskind, which I got last year, I'm pretty sure, and then didn't end up getting to it. The Story of a Murderer. I feel like that's a succinct enough title for you to understand what this is about, but I do know that it involves a character who has a really good sense of smell, and he wants to create the perfect perfume that may include murdering people and turning them into the perfume. Specifically, I think like virgin women, of course, because of course that would be the key ingredients for the perfume. Also, I just have to mention that I really like the font, like the text treatment in this, so I definitely think that this will be a fast read as well. Not that that's necessary, I'm just saying that I think it'll be really engaging and something that I could probably read within a night. If I wanted to. I don't have to do that. And then some more short stories. I recently got The Bloody Chamber by Angela Carter, who I've never read anything from before, and I love this vintage edition. It's vintage as in the publisher, this isn't actually vintage, it's just the publisher. This is a beautiful cover, and I love all these like different sort of motifs that go along with things that are in these stories. I will read you the list. I think there's one, I know that Angela Carter does a lot of sort of fairy tale retellings and makes them, fairy tales are already grotesque and dark for the most part, but she, I think, takes it a step further, but also adds a lot of like mysticism and fantastical elements from what I gather. And I think with this, like Bloody Key here, just like one, I think that's indicating that one of the stories is a Bluebeard retelling sort of thing. The stories in this are The Bloody Chamber, The Courtship of Mr. Lion, The Tiger's Bride, Puss in Boots, The Airy King, The Snow Child, The Lady of the... Yes. The Lady of the House of Love, The Werewolf, The Company of Wolves, and Wolf Alice. And I have been wanting to jump into some Angela Carter, but I also got this because I bought the Company of Wolves movie. So, of course, I would like to read stories that it is based on before watching the movie. So, I'm very excited about this, especially because since I just recently finished The Lottery and Other Stories by Shirley Jackson, I wonder how they will compare as authors. I don't know how much comparison they really get in terms of people just like bringing them up in association with each other, since they're both sort of known for their horror stories. Yeah, it'll just be interesting to see how they compare in terms of like what their similarities are and what their differences are. Not that one has to be better than the other. That's my clarification. So everything I've shown you so far, I am definitely reading in October, and this is probably the last one that's on like my for sure list for this month. Even though we're like a third of the way through it. Oh my god. Anyway, that is Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno-Garcia, and this kind of reminds me of My Cousin Rachel by Daphne du Maurier, because the main character receives a letter from her cousin telling her that she, I don't know if her cousin is male or female, but telling the main character, I think her name is, Noemi, telling Noemi that she must come to this house where her cousin is. And so she goes, and it's about that family and like weird goings on in the house, and I hear it's very grotesque. So I feel like that's perfect for October specifically. I'm really looking forward to diving into this, and I have high expectations just because there are a number of booktubers that I watch and have similar taste to who also really loved this. So I have high expectations, and I hope it's not too gross. I don't know, I don't think I've ever read like a gross book before. And then for the rest of the titles, there are a couple that are like, I would like to get to these in November because they just feel like November titles. Other than that, I could read them in October, November, December. It doesn't really matter so much. So the next one, which I probably, this one and the next one that I'll mention, I was trying to figure out which book I wanted to start, and I ended up going with Perfume, which is why I'm like barely into it. With Perfume, this one and the next one that I'll show you, I read the first pages of and decided to go with Perfume, but I have a feeling that once I finish Perfume, like this will be the next one that I pick up after finishing Perfume, because the first page was like, I wanted to keep reading, but I felt like I could read Perfume more quickly and just read that and then move on to this one. Whenever I say something like that, I feel the need to clarify, like, I'm not just trying to check off books on my... I say this all the time. I don't need to get into it again. But anyway, the first page was so well written. I really wanted to continue, but I also, again, I just said I felt like Perfume was right in the moment. And anyway, this book is called The Betrayals. I recently got it, and so it also... That's kind of another factor as to why I would like to get to it soon, because whenever I get a new book, it's like, all right, let's see if I can actually get to this in a good period of time after purchasing. Yeah, this is The Betrayals by Bridget Collins, and I'm actually just gonna like read you the inside because I think it's well written and just so intriguing. It's exactly why I bought the book in the first place. So, at Montfair, an exclusive academy tucked away in the mountains, the best and brightest are trained for excellence in the grand jeu, an arcane and mysterious contest. Leo Martin was once a student there, but lost his passion for the grand jeu following a violent tragedy. Now he returns in disgrace, exiled to his old place of learning with his political career in tatters. Montfair has changed since he studied there, even allowing a woman, Claire Dryden, to serve in the grand jeu's highest office of Magister Ludi. When Leo first sees Claire, he senses an odd connection with her, though he's sure they have never met before. The bond between them is strengthening, but both Cleo... What? I just merged their names together. But both Leo and Claire have built their lives on lies, and as the legendary midsummer game draws closer, secrets are whispering in the walls. What? Secrets are whispering in the walls. Like, I'm so intrigued. Also, and I already mentioned that the writing was just so beautiful. Like, it seems just right up, like, exactly what I like. Like, descriptive, lyrical, poetic, but also, like, not too much. I don't know, at least to me it's not too much. And I also just quickly wanted to show you, I just keep throwing things on my bed, show you the naked hardback. There's this beautiful clock on the cover, and then obviously it's all like gold foiling. Then there's like this weird spider design on the back, and then the spine looks like an older book. Oh my god, I'm just really excited. It's just so beautiful. Yes, looking forward to it. I'm gonna say that for all the books. I think I've already said it like 5 times. Probably at least once for every book. And then the other book, The 13th Tale by Diane Setterfield. This was on my list of books to get to this year. I'm going to get to it. I hope. Okay. I'm also just going to read the back of this. I have, again, high expectations and high hopes for this, especially because it's very comparable to The House at Riverton and The Forgotten Garden. Okay, well, not those 2 books specifically. The House at Riverton and The Forgotten Garden are just my favorite books by Kate Morton, and this book seems along the lines of Kate Morton's novels, which she is a historical fiction writer. That's kind of all you need to know. Like, she has a way, at least Kate Morton, she has a way of making, like, houses and settings, like, very much a character itself, as well as just like having this expansive, full, like, family history, and it's very character driven, but still there are like mysteries weaved into the plot line, and I'm expecting that from the 13th Tale because of just the way that this premise is set up, which I will now read to you. Reclusive author Vida Winter, famous for her collection of 12 enchanting stories, has spent the past 6 decades penning a series of alternate lives for herself. Now old and ailing, she is ready to reveal the truth about her extraordinary existence and the violent and tragic past she has kept secret for so long. Calling on Margaret Leah? It's L-E-A, so I don't know if it's like Leah or if it's Lee. But Margaret, calling on Margaret, a young biographer troubled by her own painful history, Vida decinters the life she meant to bury for good. Margaret is mesmerized by the author's tale of Gothic strangeness, featuring the beautiful and willful Isabel, the Farrell twins Adeline and Emmeline, a ghost, a governess, a topiary garden, and a devastating fire. Together, Margaret and Vida confront the ghosts that have haunted them while becoming finally transformed by the truth themselves. And I just have a feeling that they're going to end up being related, or Margaret is going to be related to people in the past in Vida's past. Because why else would she be chosen as the biographer, you know? Like, why? It's just a thing. I've read enough historical fiction, I feel like, to pick up on that, to know that she's significant in some way. I also have Piranesi by Susanna Clarke on my list here. I'm not going to tell you what this is about, though, because I kind of forgot details, and I don't want to know. I don't want to read the inside. I can't remember now, thankfully, but I'm pretty sure I watched somebody's video, and they said something that was kind of spoilery, and then I was upset. But now I don't remember that detail anymore, so now I'm happy. And it's really short, but sort of mystical, fantastical, mythical. There's a house with a maze in it, maybe, or like, I think there's a maze or some sort of labyrinth. I think it may be inspired by the Minotaur myth story. That's all I'm gonna say. I could be a little off on all of that, but again, it was on my wish list before it came out, and then people proceeded to read it and be like, this is so good, so it's on my list. And it's short. I purchased it earlier this year, so again, it's sort of like, let's not wait too long on this. And then, speaking of waiting too long, I guess this will be the next one that I mention. Sort of continuing with this historical fiction, though Piranesi does have, like, fantastical elements to it. Going back to historical fiction really quickly is The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This is more so just like a historical fiction book that I would like to read. Kind of seems like a November book in my opinion, just based on feeling. And this is about Evelyn Hugo. It's set up a very similar way to the 13th tale and just like a lot of other historical fiction. How many times have I said historical fiction now? But it's a very common setup where there's like the character who's probably at this point in the present like older, and then they're telling somebody about their past, about their life. And in this one, Evelyn Hugo is talking about her 7 husbands, but also about her other lovers and relationships she had, and also her life as a Hollywood starlet. And I think she's supposed to... I've heard a lot of people mention Elizabeth Taylor in terms of sort of stars that she is supposed to be similar to in terms of like real life figures. And also Evelyn Hugo is Cuban, bisexual, and that is... I've heard like good things in terms of that representation, which is always great. So also just like the story just sounds so interesting, and it's honestly surprisingly short. All the historical fiction that I've read has been like, God, 400 plus pages probably, like closer to 500 probably, and this is not even 400 pages. So interesting. Yeah, I'm really not going in any order here, but this one I have on my list. Probably also going to just read you the inside, and that is The Historian by Elizabeth Kostova. I'm just really in the mood for some... I need to have a dark academia book by the end of this year. I have to have read one because I'm so in the mood for one. Specifically, I really want to read If We Were Liars by, I think it's M.L. Rio? M.L. Rio? I think that's the author's name. But I am not that familiar with the Shakespeare plays that are discussed in that. I'm not going to get into what If We Were Liars, if we were villains. What did I say? Did I say If We Were Liars? I meant to say, I know I started to, but If We Were Villains by M.L. Rio has to do with like characters who are performing Shakespeare plays, and the plays that they discuss, and I guess like quote quite a lot. I'm not as familiar with those, so I would like to read those Shakespeare plays before I read If We Were Villains, and I also don't have If We Were Villains or those plays, so this is the next best thing, I think, even though it's freaking huge. This is the next best thing, I think, for something with dark academia vibes that I've heard good things about. I also have a book called The Furies by Katie Lowe, which I've heard not great things about, even though it's much shorter, and I think it's technically YA as opposed to like regular adult fiction. Yeah, I'm also just gonna read the inside. This one is kind of long, but I think it does a good job of telling you what it's about. Also, there's a map on the inside. That's great. Okay, so The Historian by Elizabeth Kostova. Late one night, exploring her father's library, a young woman finds an ancient book and a cachet of yellowing letters. The letters are all addressed to "my dear and unfortunate successor," and they plunge her into a world she never dreamed of, a labyrinth where the secrets of her father's past and her mother's mysterious fate connect to an inconceivable evil hidden in the depths of history. The letters provide links to one of the darkest powers that humanity has ever known, and to a centuries-long quest to find the source of that darkness and wipe it out. It is a quest for the truth about Vlad the Impaler, the medieval ruler whose barbarous reign formed the basis of the legend of Dracula. Which, like, wasn't that not true? But anyway... generations of historians have risked their reputations, their sanity, and even their lives to learn the truth about Vlad the Impaler and Dracula. Now one young woman must decide whether to take up this quest herself, to follow her father in a hunt that nearly brought him to ruin years ago, when he was a vibrant young scholar and her mother was still alive. What does the legend of Vlad the Impaler have to do with the modern world? Is it possible that the Dracula of myth truly existed, and that he has lived on, century after century, pursuing his own unknowable ends? The answers to these questions cross time and borders, as first the father and then the daughter search for clues, from dusty Ivy League libraries to Istanbul, Budapest, and the depths of Eastern Europe. Continuing on the other side. In city after city, in monasteries and archives, in letters and in secret conversations, the horrible truth emerges about Vlad the Impaler's dark reign, and about a time-defying pact that may have kept his awful work alive down through the ages. Parsing obscure signs and hidden texts, reading codes worked into the fabric of me. I want to read this like right now. I'm not gonna lie. I lost my place, worked into the fabrics of medieval monastic traditions, and evading the unknown adversaries who will go to any lengths to conceal and protect Vlad's ancient powers. One woman comes ever close. Okay, you get it. There's secrets, there's codes, there's hidden meanings. It just sounds really great and interesting. And dark academia vibes, and like libraries. Libraries. I love that that's an element that I had to clarify and single out there. So yes, that's The Historian. And then these are the two books that I feel like specifically work for November, and that's Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte and Lolly Willows by Sylvia Townsend Warner. They give me the fall vibes, even the covers. But specifically like November, I just feel like it works for. It just works, okay? Just trust me. I have actually started Wuthering Heights before, but then I got kind of confused because there was like characters with the same names, and that was really annoying because I kept mixing them up. So I'm starting over. I wasn't that far into it, so it's not that much of a big deal. And this was also on my list of books to get to this year. Gonna get to it. I don't think I need to tell you what Wuthering Heights is about. It's a revenge story. That's the one thing I think people on BookTube are very adamant about. It's not a love story, it's a revenge story. So don't go into it thinking it's going to be romantic. But also it's kind of like Gothic and stuff. Great. And then Lolly Willows, I'm also just going to read the back to you. I always wonder, I feel like not a lot of people read the backs and or like the inside flaps and stuff like that. Most people say their own synopsis, which I usually like to do, but at the same time when it's already right there in like concise with the details that you know, I might as well read it. Also, I like that it is concise here. So this one says, Lolly Willows, so gentle and accommodating, has depths no one suspects. When she suddenly announces that she is leaving London and moving alone to the depths of the countryside, her overbearing relatives are horrified, but Lolly has a greater, far darker calling than family: witchcraft. Yes, okay. Yes, and I'm kind of maybe even more intrigued by this just because of how short it is. Like witchcraft, and where is it going to go with the witchcraft? Because there are so many different like avenues that you could take. Is it like true Wicca? Is it witch like the craft? Is it witch like I want to know. But you know what I mean? Oh man. Also her outfit is so interesting, too. Okay. And then 4 more books. I can't forget about these two. 2 more sort of classics. The Woman in Black is considered a classic, even though I'm pretty sure it was published in, like, the 70s or 80s, and to me, that's not, like, classic territory, but okay. And I have actually already read this before. This is by Susan Hill. I feel like the movie has really overshadowed the details of the book, though, so I would like to reread it. And I could read this anytime, like this month, next month, December even, especially because it does start on Christmas Eve. It's one of those sort of Victorian era stories that, you know, is a ghost story that takes place on Christmas Eve. So, and I just mean, it's very influenced, but it's supposed to be set up as if it's like from the Victorian era. That's sort of the writing style and structure that Susan Hill went with, which is, I think, is more so why people consider it a classic in such a way, because it feels like it is. And then I also have Madame Bovary by Gustave Flaubert. This was also on my list of books to get to this year. I was planning on like finishing Tess. Have I mentioned Tess in this video yet? I was planning on finishing Tess of the D'Urbervilles, then moving on to Madame Bovary, and then reading Wuthering Heights, like having this be my classic for October, and then my classic for November would be Wuthering Heights, but then, at least my main one, but I am not sure if that's what my plan is anymore, but this is still on my TBR for the rest of the year, hoping to get to it. Yeah, and then the other 2 books that I have are part of series. If I hold this book up one more time in a TBR video, throw it at me, please. And that's The Dream Thieves by Maggie Stiefvater. This is the second book in the Raven cycle. The first book, The Raven Boys, I read a few years ago now, and it was one of my favorite books that year. This is actually probably my favorite YA series, because I just love the Raven Boy so much. And I got 100 pages into this and just like needed to stop for whatever reason and haven't come back to it. It's so annoying that I keep... It's because I keep looking at it though, and I'm like, okay, but then I immediately want to like move on to the next book and then move on to the next book, because there's 4 books in the series, and I don't want to wait too long between each book. And that's the thing. I keep looking at it and being like, but that's not just 1 book, that's 3 books. So anyway, The Dream Thieves, The Raven Cycle. I know it's going to be so good. And then lastly here, we have King of Scars by Leigh Bardugo. This is the next book that I have in the Grishaverse books. I read the Shadow and Bone trilogy and the Six of Crows duology earlier this year, and I bought this, and so I just have this, King of Scars, and Rule of Wolves to read, and then I'm done with all the major Grishaverse books. There are like a couple of companion books, which is why I say major, but in terms of like actual plot lines and stuff, just this and Rule of Wolves. So it would be cool to read the last 2 books that I have left in the overall series, you know, in the same year that I started the series. But it's okay if I don't get to it, but I do have it on my list. And also this follows Nikolai, who's my favorite character in all the Grishaverse books, though Nina comes in a close second. She's my favorite character in the Six of Crows duology, and then Nikolai, of course, is my favorite character in the Shadow and Bone trilogy. And he's the main character that we're following here, though I keep doing this. I don't know how loud this is. But I know that we're going to be following, of course, other characters from the series. Curious mostly on if Nikolai really is going to be like the focus, or if we're going to have perspectives the same way that we get perspectives in Six of Crows. I think it's going to go that route. But I love Nikolai. Okay. Oh yeah, that's another video that I keep meaning to do. I've already watched Shadow and Bone on Netflix like twice, and I thought about having a video that's like watching Shadow and Bone for the 3rd time so I can finally talk about it in a video. So that's a video idea, even though I don't know when exactly that will happen. But I'm very excited for season 2 because, of course, if you've read the Grishaverse books, Nikolai, my favorite character, if you didn't hear that already, he shows up in book 2 of the Shadow and Bone trilogy, which is why if you've watched Shadow and Bone but haven't read the books, you're like, who's Nikolai? It's because he doesn't show up till book 2. Is that kind of spoilery? I don't know. Anyway, that's the end. I have a headache. That sucks. Anyway, what are you going to be reading? There are so many questions I can ask here. What are you reading? What do you plan on reading for the fall time? How's your reading going this year? But I think the number 1 question I have is like, what is your favorite book for this time of year? / like that could be a specific title, or it could be like the criteria that you like for this time of year. What are elements that you look for in your ideal fall book? Does that make sense? I hope so. Enough rambling. This was a lot. I talk a lot. If you didn't realize yet, now you know. I didn't have to tell you. Yeah, I'm so excited for all these. I hope they're all great. So, yes. I don't know what else to say. So, thank you for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!